Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching India Tonight with me, Sumita Karir, and our top story tonight. Well, in a significant push to bolster India-US ties amidst escalating trade tensions, two senior Indian ministers are in the United States at the moment. Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal is leading a high-level delegation in Washington to advance negotiations on a landmark bilateral trade agreement which aims to double bilateral trade to $500 billion by 2030. Now, this despite recent US tariffs on Indian goods over oil imports from Russia. Meanwhile, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar is all set to hold crucial bilateral talks with US Secretary of State Marco Rubio in New York in just a short while from now. He will be likely addressing visa fee and strategic cooperation, and that on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly. Now, these engagements signal a renewed diplomatic momentum even as challenges like the H-1B visa hike loom large for Indian professionals. What do these meetings essentially mean for India-US ties? Let's bring on board a guest who's joining us tonight on the show. Joining us now is Mr. Varun Singh. He's the MD of XIPHIAS Investment Migration Company. Thank you very much, Mr. Singh, for taking the time out and speaking to us here on ET Now. Your first thoughts on this visit that's been undertaken by two cabinet ministers, two union ministers from India, Dr. S. Jaishankar and Minister Piyush Goyal.
Yeah, hi Sumita. So this is a very important phase that our two important ministers are in US. And in this time, there is a huge reform and the new change which has been imposed by the Trump administration. This is also creating a huge geopolitical distress and kind of psychological change in the people and family and the workers, H-1B petition workers who are working in US. So this is a very important phase where the Indian government should also negotiate for opening the sub-economic hub for the IT companies who are operating in US so that they get benefits in operating and outsourcing back in India. And the changes is for not this time. It is the White House has already confirmed that it is for the next year. The reform is going to change. Though the US government is going to make a huge income from this deposits of 100,000, but on the long run they are going to lose a lot of skill talents, innovations, and technology. And the startups are going to hit very hard on this fees. So this may bring a very big change back to India. And I believe this is...
Absolutely, Mr. Singh, and there is a lot of uncertainty that really persists as far as that particular ruling, that particular policy by the United States is concerned. Let me also bring on board Professor Madhav Das Nalapat. He's the Vice Chairman at Manipal Advanced Research Group. Thank you very much, Mr. Nalapat, for taking the time out and speaking to us here on ET Now. Your first thoughts on the fact that Dr. S. Jaishankar is expected to meet with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, especially even as Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal is in the United States. The H-1B visa fee is an issue that affects Indians and particularly those that are currently in the United States. So what are the big expectations in your opinion? What are you anticipating will transpire between Jaishankar and Rubio?
Look, the fact of the matter is the H-1B visa is not good for India as much as good for the United States.
Professor Nalapat, I believe you're on mute. If you could please unmute yourself.
No, I've unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead, Mr. Nalapat.
Yeah. Look, I want to say that the H-1B visa is important for the US as well to ensure that the US also grows. Its tech sector grows, and its advantage over China grows. By blocking off Indians, you are denying a very important source of intellectual talent, and you're doing that to the benefit of China. It makes no sense from a geopolitical perspective. So I'm not sure that this kind of situation is going to continue for some more time. I think already reality is beginning to kick in, and the reality of China is also there. It's been there for a long, long time. Secretary Rubio, various others are quite aware of the threat from China, as indeed was Donald Trump till about a few weeks ago. But so the fact of the matter is, you are shutting off essentially the ability of the United States to compete with China when you're shutting off Indians. And may I point out that Indians in the United States, Indian Americans as well as Indians who are there on H-1B visa, they are, if you look at it per capita, the most disciplined and the least lawless group in the United States. The most disciplined and the highest number of taxpayers. The taxes they pay are very, very high. So frankly, this is not just shooting yourself in the foot, it's shooting yourself right in the face.
Right.
Well, so I mean, I'm sure Secretary
Absolutely.
Rubio understands that. I'm very sure about that. I'm also sure about one more thing. We are not going to concede on agriculture and dairy because it involves the livelihoods of hundreds of millions
Right.
of our people, and we are not going to concede on that. And the United States needs to accept that, and we also need
Absolutely.
to accept that these tariffs are not good for the U.S. in particular. Thank you.
Absolutely, Professor Nalapat, given the fact that these tariffs are only elevating inflation in the United States, but we'll come to that point about tariffs and these trade negotiations which are going on as we speak between Minister Goel and, of course, his U.S. counterpart. But first, let me get you back to the point that I made, when we introduced you on the show, that essentially is about a meeting between Dr. S. Jaishankar and Marco Rubio. What are you expecting is going to be the outcome of this meeting?
Look, if I can be frank, I don't see any immediate outcome. The Jaishankar is an extremely talented diplomat, and Marco Rubio is fully aware of the threat from China. You just check and see his statement, previous to his becoming the Secretary of State, his statements as a senator. He's extremely aware of the importance of India and the US working together. But the point is, as a secretary to the cabinet minister level in the United States Trump administration, he can't diverge very far from the official line of President Trump, who seems to be on a rampage against India. But the good news is the meeting is taking place. The good news is the Quad meeting has taken place. And that's a very good sign. It means that for the Quad summit, there's a very good likelihood of Donald Trump coming to India. And I think that would be a good location to bury the hatchet. Let me remind you, Prime Minister Modi has responded very coolly, very calmly, and very politely to whatever verbal sallies and policy salvos he is getting from the United States. I think that's the right policy to follow. As far as Minister Jaishankar is concerned, he is very, very able, and I'm very certain he will sketch out the case of India, which is a very, very strong case. Same goes with Piyush Goyal, who understands the mind of the Prime Minister as well as Minister Jaishankar does. So the reality is the Prime Minister has been a proponent of India-US friendship from the beginning. He made sure India joined the Quad. India signed the Ford Foundation Agreement. And that, I am very certain, the relations will go back on track given that reality. Thank you.
Right, Professor Nalapat. In fact, lots of interesting outcomes are anticipated. We'll have to sort of track the trajectory of where this relationship really goes and what are some of the irritants and whether the United States will be ready to sort of work on removing those irritants in the US-India relationship, given the fact that Marco Rubio himself has stated just a couple of days back that India and US relationship is one of the most significant relationships for US in this century. I'll come back to you in just a bit to expand a bit more on that. But let me go to Mr. Singh. Mr. Singh, when we talk about the H-1B visa fee increase, that policy that the Donald Trump administration has undertaken, does the United States have enough tech talent to replace these workers, even as Donald Trump states that by way of this policy, he's essentially pushing American companies to hire more Americans?
Actually, not, Sumita. This scenario, the reality is not the same. If the politically, it's all MAGA and driven by the policies that, okay, they are trying to make more of a kind of a negotiation with the Indian government or to put a more pressure. But on the reality, the entire industry rely on Indian talents. And this 70% of this contribution is not a small contribution. And this contribution, the fees, if they are increasing, the companies, the corporations are going to have a huge impact on their workforce, and the technology will definitely start moving. And this is where the negotiation should happen with the Indian government. And I'm sure the Jaishankar and the ministry is there. So they should understand that this is not about the future, this is about the current situation. Because there is a huge backlog for the Indian families and the Indian corporates who are living in US, and even it's not about the job, it's about the quality of life, it's about creating the panic situation in the families and the future certain uncertainties. So this fees, yes, for the startups and for the mid-sized companies, this is a disaster decision. And of course the Indian diplomatic decision, and there is this will damage the trade relation with the US and India in the long term, because it's not about the IT. There are a lot of semiconductors, STEM companies, and there are a lot of research labs. This is all going to get affected with this decision. And I believe that yes, there should be a proper negotiation should happen with the government. There must be a kind of a peace should
Absolutely.
be
Mr.
given.
Singh, it remains to be seen whether this is an issue that both the sides will be addressing as far as, these particular meetings are concerned. However, sources are telling ET now that India is looking to raise this particular issue at the diplomatic level. But let me come to you, Professor Nalapat. Can the United States be trusted given the fact that Donald Trump has called the Prime Minister his friend? He stated that India-US ties are on good footing, but his administration at the same time has hiked the H-1B visa fee along with several other policy moves that have come in the past few days. How will India now move on its US strategy going forward?
It can do is speed up the pace of domestic reform. The fact of the matter is, even now,
Right.
in many sectors, investing in India is a nightmare. And during Modi 3.0, this is the exact crisis that now the Prime Minister is confronting, and which can bring out the best in him and the best in the government. We need to reform several of our tax laws, several of our own tariff laws, several of our own regulations on industry and services, and we have to ensure that we can attract from abroad. So we don't have to have people going there. They will want to come to India. So I think this kind of a major reform overhaul is overdue, and I'm looking forward to that reforms really getting kick-started by this hard kick that India has got, courtesy President Trump, and being completed, but the rollout being completed by Modi 3.0, because that is absolutely essential to generate the kind of growth we need to avoid large-scale youth unemployment. And you've seen across the neighborhood, you've seen the Philippines, for example, just now, the problems that come with youth unemployment. And the youth, frankly, I mean, this is you've seen that, as I said, in all these countries. And let's not kid ourselves that it won't happen in India. It can happen in India, but strong reforms can ensure that it does not. And I have every confidence under Prime Minister Modi, there will be strong reforms, because now it's a question of the future of India. It's not just a question of 6 months or 1 year. It's a question of the future of India. We don't want to see India in a situation similar to what some of our neighboring countries have faced. We want to see a strong, prosperous India, a Viksit Bharat. And for that, you need a Viksit mind for reform. And I'm very certain that those minds are going to be chosen and put to work, and that these reforms are going to happen. This is a rude shock, and I think that rude shock can bring out the best in our government, led by Prime Minister Modi, and it can bring out the best in our industrialists, all of whom basically, I mean, many of whom are weaned on this for foreign import. Well, they have a problem now. So I think when there's so much of local talent that the whole world is looking at, Germany, UK,
Right.
you name it, all these countries, then I think our own companies need to ensure that that talent is utilized.
Right.
And we do more to utilize that rather than providing jobs to outsiders. Let's provide jobs to our own people. Thank you.
Absolutely. Professor Nalapat, in fact, the Indian government has been looking at boosting domestic production, domestic consumption. And of course, the Prime Minister just yesterday gave a clarion call to the nation once again on becoming self-reliant and not becoming reliant on Videshi products, but manufacturing Swadeshi products, and of course, manufacturing not just for India, but for the world as well. But Professor Nalapat, even though both sides, India and the United States, spoke about how the talks were positive, trade talks were positive, and the talks now need to be fast-tracked, what sticking point do you see between United States and India, particularly with respect to this round of talks that's currently underway in the United States?
Look, the fact is that we have to respect each other's red lines. It can't be a situation where we respect the US red lines and they don't respect our red lines. And, I mean, you've seen what happened, the farmers' agitation, and you've seen the way it was handled was again very diplomatic. And I think as a consequence, that agitation fizzled out. But the reality is that is what we will be facing if we agree to some of these outrageous demands. And these demands have been made for the first time in this manner. It's either or. And you can't have the situation in which, either you accept my terms or no terms. There's no other terms. And what are these terms? The maximum terms. This is not a way of negotiating. It's a way of losing friends. And across the world, the US under Donald Trump is losing its credibility as security partner. And that again goes to the benefit of China. The Chinese will then step in, they'll try to fill the void, and eventually the US will be a big loser, and its partners and allies who relied on it will also be losers.
Absolutely.
So I think, President Trump, you better reset yourself quickly before it's too late for the US. Thank you.
Right, Professor Nalapat, and this even as Russia, India, China are only getting closer. In fact, many other countries have also hit out at the United States for its unilateral and protectionist trading policies. We'll dwell upon that point in just a bit. But let me come to you, Varun Singh. Mr. Singh, how do you think this policy of H-1B visa hike is going to pan out, given the fact that the track record of Donald Trump actually rolling out policy and their implementation has not been very smooth? And secondly, I want to ask you, is it the end of the American dream for India's techies?
Sumita, somewhat Dr. Nalapat has made it very clear that the US government is going to, they are hitting not on their toes, they're hitting on their face. And this is what it is, because I see this as an opportunity by the Indian government, and the fees which they have hiked it, this doesn't look reasonable for a small size or big size companies at all. Though they are going to increase their funds and their earnings while making the government income will increase while making this fees high, but on the long term, they are going to not attract the global talent and innovation with this. And H-1B has been the very strong magnet for attracting all the top talents across the globe. And if this is the psychology, if they want to play with, I don't believe that any Indian smart workers will prefer to go to US for uncertainties to have a residency or kind of a settlement there. In terms of the students, upcoming students also, this will be a big distress, and I don't think this is going to work on a long term. They may have to reform, and this pause has been done already by the White House for the next session. For the next year, they are going to implement. But before that, I believe they will have some kind of an understanding. Otherwise, other countries like US, other countries like Canada, UK, and Australia will definitely take a benefit. And I see that, yes, India has a better governance now, better leadership. And this is where the India government should have a reverse H-1B innovation hub funds, the remote work zones, and the National Talent Retention Mission should be there.
Absolutely. Mr. Singh, so Mr. Singh, perhaps the move will lead to more and more techies innovating right here in India and giving a push to India's Startup India program and, in fact, entrepreneurship in the country. But at this point, gentlemen, we have some breaking news that's just coming in. The White House essentially says that doctors may be exempt from H-1B visa fees. Professor Nalapath, your first thoughts on this exemption that's been announced by the White House. We did also see a set of clarifications that came in from the White House, essentially on H-1B visa fee of $1 lakh. What do you make of this recent statement that's come in? White House essentially stating that doctors may be exempt from H-1B visa fee. Why is the United States now exempting doctors?
I'll tell you very clearly. The reason is that doctors are good for the US, Indian doctors are good for the US, and frankly, the US health system, it's already not in a very good shape. It'll be in awful shape if Indian doctors are not there. And it's not only in health, it's in tech and so many other fields. For heaven's sake, in tech, it's not because of any partiality towards Indians that you have so many Indians at the top. It's because of sheer merit. And you're striking a blow against merit. And what is happening? Your own MAGA base is suffering high prices. They're suffering from, the inflation that this is bringing. And you cannot be satisfied with watching television speeches of your hero and then go back to the grocery store and have a very much bigger bill and go back and meet your family and tell them I can't, bring that much home because I don't have enough money. Joblessness in the United States is reaching a high, and inflation is reaching a high, and job growth is reaching a low. All this is happening, and all this is happening. Why? Because you've got policy in the US at the top driven by emotion. You cannot drive policy by emotion or sentiment. It's got to be hard rationality. And if it's not rationality, the country itself will turn on you. And that is, I think, what we are seeing now in the case of President Trump. His own party is now getting worried about their prospects in the midterms. And they're now making, Senator Ted Cruz, for example, made some pretty strong comments. Marco Rubio, I'm sure, feels the same way, but he's no longer a senator. He has to basically, publicly at least, toe the line of his boss. But I'm very certain that there are voices in the US saying that it's time for the US to get off this anti-India kick. And God knows, it looks to be some kind of an ego issue. I can't see any rational reason behind it.
Right.
But the reality is that enough people are there in Washington, in New York, in Atlanta, in Houston, so many locations who are basically warning the Republicans, watch out, don't do this. You're basically making our party a write-off
Absolutely.
in the next election. Thank you.
Right. Right, Professor Nalapath, in fact, this is something that we were just discussing a short while back. In fact, the criticism of Donald Trump's policies has come about from very many of the executives in Donald Trump's own administration as well, who have stated that it's not perhaps a good idea to have ties going downhill with India, as India has been a trusted and a long-standing partner of the United States. So this another U-turn that's coming in from the Donald Trump administration with exemptions being given to doctors. Let me take that point across to you, Mr. Singh. Now, India, in its statement, if you remember yesterday, suggested that it hopes that the visa issue will be addressed suitably by the United States. But these protectionist policies, what will they end up yielding from countries like India and China, especially in terms of reciprocal measures? Do you see more collaboration, for instance, happening on the IT front, IT talent front between India and China?
Yes, absolutely, Sumita. There will be a lot of joint programs, and there will be a lot of joint developments, education also in terms of technology hubs, research, and this is going to be part of this exemptions. What you have started listing about doctors, there will be more exemptions coming, and for sure, because they need after that they will analyze that this is not only about the IT; it's all about the ecosystem. And China, of course, China is some portion, but they are not that competitive. What we Indians have the skill sets margin in as a top all the segment of the industry. So reciprocal buys, I understand that yes, there is a huge change is going to make the difference. But as of now, this is too early to give a comment on kind of the impact. But I believe they are too immature in making this decision at this stage. and there will be certainly there will be some better decision will be taken on this H1 tag, because otherwise they are going to lose. And right, Professor Nalapart told that this is something which is they are going to slap on their face by themselves, and the party will understand that they are making a big decision, because all the big giants in the IT companies, they will start doing offshore business back in India, and this is how it is going to benefit India finally, but on the long run, not on the immediate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Indian companies will also be looking at other geographies, as many of them currently already are. But let me come to you, Professor Nalapat, and ask you the final question. Now, India and the United States have a partnership that spans across several sectors, defense, technology, and many other aspects. When we talk about negotiations on a deal, what is it that India could offer to reach an agreement, to reach an understanding with the United States?
Look, Sunita, there are very clear limits to any understanding that the US can have with China.
Right.
You've seen
I
the
understand, but what is it that we could offer, sir?
Well, what we are offering, frankly, is security of a democracy versus, coming closer and strengthening an autocracy that wants to take your place. It's, you read the CCP, Communist Party of China magazines in their own language. Watch their talk shows. It's all about ensuring that China dominates the world and America is pushed to second place. And that would be a disaster for the dollar. It would be a disaster for the MAGA movement. So this belief that, oh, China, well,
Absolutely.
China, I mean, he's treating China and India in the same way. We are defense partners, defense allies, and China is your main adversary. And if let's say you invite your own house,
Right.
your worst enemy with a gun loaded, and your best friend who is going to defend you, and you basically throw your best friend out, what sense does it make? I can't make any sense out of it, and neither can the vast majority of people in the Trump cabinet or the Republican Party or the United States. So I think President Trump is making himself the most unpopular president at this point in his term. I think he'll go as the most unpopular president in the history of the United States, not a record that he would relish having. Thank you.
Absolutely, Professor Nalapat. And in fact, he's also isolating himself. And you talked about hyphenating India and China. Well, he's hyphenated India and Pakistan. Those are the kind of, actions and, of course, comments that have come in from Donald Trump. And like I stated, he's only isolating himself on global stage. We've seen the kind of response that countries have given in response to his unilateral trade agreements. In fact, some countries have not been very happy. It remains to be seen the kind of negotiations and talks that go with India, even as Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal is currently in the United States. And of course, all eyes will be on Marco Rubio's meeting with External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar. On that note, thank you very much, gentlemen, for taking the time out and speaking to us here on ET Now. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time now for us to slip into a